He suddenly drew 3 silver rubles, and with childish gravity placed them upon her leg beneath the dress, one near the knee, the other a trifle higher, the third upon her thigh. Yentl watched him with a curious smile. This won't help. It certainly won't hurt any. He had dressed her crudely, at her own level. It was one of his attributes to adjust to any character. It was a useful factor when applied to the art of magnetism. Deliberately, Yentl collected the coins and deposited them in a mortar on the dresser. "Well, thanks, anyhow." "I'm in a hurry." "What's the rush? I've missed you. For weeks I don't hear a word from you. How have you been, Yashala? We are good friends, too, after all." "Yes, yes." "Why the wool gathering? I know it must be a new girl." "Tell me, Yashala, tell me. I'm not the jealous type. I know what's going on. But to you, women are like flowers to a bee, always a new one. A sniff here, a lick there, and whist, you buzz away. How I envy you. It would be worth surrendering my last pair of drawers to be a man. Subchapter 6. Yes, there is a new one, Yasha said. He needed to talk to someone. With Yentl he felt as uninhibited as with himself. He feared neither her jealousy nor her wrath. She yielded to him as a peasant girl to a squire. Her eyes began to sparkle. She smiled the bitter smile of those who are wronged and take pleasure in this. "Didn't I know it? Who is she?" "A professor's widow." "Widow, eh? Well, well. Well, nothing." "Are you in love with her?" "Yes, a little." "If a man says a little, he means a whole lot. What is she, young? Pretty?" "Not so young. She has a daughter of 14. "Which one is it you love, the mother or the daughter?" "Both." Yeftl's throat moved, as if she had swallowed something. "You can't have both, brother. For the present, I'll be satisfied with the mother." "What's a professor like? A doctor?" "He used to teach mathematics at the university." "What's mathematics?" "Figuring." She thought it over for a moment. "I knew it. I just knew it. Me you can't fool. One look at a man, and I can tell everything. What do you want to do, marry her?" "But I have a wife already." "What can a wife mean to you? How did you meet her?" "She was at the theater, and someone introduced her. No, I was mind-reading, and I told her that she was a widow and the rest of it." "How did you know that?" "That's my secret." "Well, what else?" "She fell in love with me. She wants to leave everything behind and go abroad with me." "Just like that?" "She wants to marry me." "A Jew?" "She wants me to convert a little." "Just a little, eh? Why do you have to leave the country?" Yasha's face grew suddenly grim. "What do I have here? For 25 years I've been doing my act, and I'm still a pauper. How much longer can I keep walking the tightrope? 10 years at the most. Everyone praises me, but nobody wants to pay. In other countries they appreciate somebody like me. There, a fellow who knows only a handful of tricks is rich and famous. He performs before royalty, travels about in a fancy carriage. I'd be treated differently even here in Poland if my name became famous in Western Europe. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Here they imitate everything from abroad. An opera singer can screech like an owl, but if he has sung in Italy, everyone shouts, 'Bravo!' Yes, but you'd have to convert. What of it? You cross yourself and they sprinkle you with water. How do I know which God is the right one? No one's been up to heaven. I don't pray anyhow." "Once you're a Catholic, you'll pray all right." "Abroad, no one pays any attention to it. I'm a magician, not a priest. You know, there is a new fad now. The lights are put out, and you call up the spirits of the dead. You sit around a table with your hands on top of it, and the table rises. All the newspapers are full of it." "Real spirits?" "Don't be ridiculous. The medium does it all. He sticks out his foot and raises the table. He clicks his big toe, and that means the spirits are sending messages. The wealthiest people attend these seances, especially the women. Let's say someone's son dies, and they wish to communicate with him. They give the medium money, and he produces the son's ghost." Yeftl's eyes grew big. "Really?" "Silly. Maybe it's black magic." "They don't know any black magic." "I was told there is a man in Lublin who can show the dead in a black mirror. They say I could see Leibush there." "Then why don't you go? They'll show you a picture and tell you it's Leibush." "Well, they do show you something." "Idiotic," Yasha said, amazed that he should be discussing such matters with someone like Yentl. I can show you whomever you like in the mirror, even your grandmother. There is no God, is that it? Of course there is, but no one has spoken with him. How could God speak? If he spoke in Yiddish, the Christians wouldn't understand. If he spoke French, the English would complain. The Torah claims that he spoke in Hebrew, but I wasn't there to hear it. As for spirits, they also exist, but no magician can conjure them up. And what of the soul? Oh, I'm afraid. Afraid of what? At night I lie down and I can't close my eyes. All the dead parade before me. I see how they put Mama into the grave. All white she is. Why do we live anyhow? I miss you so much, Yoshua. I don't want to be offering advice, but that Gentile will drag you down to hell. Yasha bristled. Why should she? She loves me. It's no good. You can do anything you like, but you must remain a Jew. What will become of your wife? What would she do if I were to die? The husband dies, and 4 weeks later the woman rushes to stand under the wedding canopy again. Zeftel, I can be frank with you. There are no secrets between us. I want to have another fling. What about me? If I become rich, I'll not forget you either. No, you'll forget. The minute you step over the threshold, you'll have forgotten already. Don't think that I'm jealous. When I first knew you, I tingled. I would have washed your feet and drunk the bath water. But when I knew you better, I told myself, Zeftel, it's a waste, all this trembling. I'm not an educated woman and don't know much, but I've got a head on my shoulders. I do a lot of thinking, and I get all kinds of ideas. When the wind whistles through the chimney, I get very moody. You won't believe me, Yoshua, but recently I even thought of suicide. Why that, of all things? Just because I was tired and there was a rope nearby. I saw a hook on the beam, this very hook by the lamp. I climbed up on the footstool, and it fit to a hair. Then I began to laugh. Why? For no reason at all. You yank the rope, and it's all over. Yoshua, take me to Warsaw. What about the furniture? I'll sell everything. Let somebody get a bargain. What will you do in Warsaw? Don't worry, I won't sponge off you. I'll go off like that beggar woman in the story. I'll stop at some door and say, here I stay. One can do laundry and carry baskets anywhere. Chapter 3. Yasha had planned to be back at Elzbieta's for supper, but Zeftel would not hear of it. She prepared a favorite dish for him, wide noodles with cheese and cinnamon. As soon as Zeftel unbolted the door and drew the curtains, visitors began to arrive. The women came in to show off the bargains which they had found in the market, and the presents that their men had given them. The older amongst them wore battered slippers, shapeless dresses, soiled headkerchiefs. They grinned at Yasha with their toothless mouths and coquettishly displayed their own ugliness. The young matrons, in honor of the guest, had dressed up and had covered themselves with trinkets. Although Zeftel supposedly kept their relation secret, she proudly showed each braggart the string of coral that Yasha had given her. Some of the women tried it on, smirked, winked knowingly. Licentiousness was not the fashion on the hill. The wives of thieves serving in prison remained true for years until their husbands were released. But Zeftel was an outsider, lower than a gypsy. Besides, she was a deserted wife, and Yasha the magician had the reputation of being a libertine. The women bobbed their heads, whispered, cast sheep eyes at Yasha. His magical powers were well known here. The thieves often claimed that if he joined the Brotherhood, his path would be strewn with gold. It was the general opinion on the hill that it was even better to be the wife of a thief than of someone like Yasha, who traveled around with a Gentile girl, came home only on holidays, and gave his wife nothing but shame and disgrace. After a while, the men too began to drift in. Chaim Leib, short, broad-shouldered, with a yellow beard, face, and eyes, came in to cadge a Warsaw cigarette. Yasha gave him the whole pack. Zeftel put a bottle of spirits and a platter of onion rolls before Chaim Leib. He was one of the old guard, but already worn out, useless. He had served time in every prison. His ribs had been staved in. A brother of his, Baruch Klotz, a horse thief, had been boiled alive by peasants. Chaim Leib thoughtfully puffed on the Warsaw cigarette. drank a tumbler full of vodka, and asked, "What's happening in Warsaw? How is the old Pawiak prison?" Blind Mechel, a tall, heavy-set individual with the shoulders of a giant, a straight nape, a scar on the forehead, and a torn eye socket, had brought along a paper-wrapped package. Yasha knew already what it contained, a padlock for him to open. Mechel himself was an expert at lock-breaking. He always carried a jimmy, and before taking up burglary as a trade, he had been a journeyman locksmith. For years, Mechel had been trying to construct a lock that Yasha would not be able to pry. He now sat shyly at the table, waiting patiently for the conversation to come around to locks. Until now he had failed with Yasha, for no matter how intricate and artful the lock, Yasha had always managed to spring it within minutes, frequently employing nothing more than a nail or a hairpin. But Mechel would not give up. He kept betting he would construct a Peter, the like of which the angel Gabriel couldn't jimmy. Every time Mechel visited Lublin, he held consultations with the locksmith Abraham Leibush, as well as with any number of blacksmiths and mechanics. Mechel's room was set up like a tool shop, with hammers, files, metal saws, all sorts of bars, hooks, drills, pliers, and soldering irons. His wife, Black Bella, claimed Mechel's interest in tools had grown into an obsession. Yasha greeted him with a smile and a wink. Just as Mechel was sure that this time Yasha would fail, so Yasha was convinced that through some inexplicable power he would, with a twist here and a turn there, open the mechanism as if by magic. Eventually they were all there: Mendele Katschke, Josele Deitsch, Lazarel Kratzmich. Their current leader was one Berish Viskover, a tiny fellow with shifty eyes, a pointed, bald head, sharp nose and chin, and long arms like an ape. Berish Viskover, like Zeftel, came from Greater Poland. He dressed foppishly with his colored trousers, yellow shoes, velvet vests, and embroidered shirts. A hat with a feather in it was always on his head. Especially high heels on his boots added to his stature. Berish was so skillful that he could steal a watch from a pickpocket. He knew Russian, Polish, and German, and was on good terms with the authorities, was in fact less thief than grafter and intermediary. Years ago he had served a prison term, not for theft, but for having cheated a nobleman at a card game known as Little Chain. Berish Viskover was as sharp at cards as Blind Mechel was at locks, but he was no match for Yasha. Yasha always showed Berish new tricks that baffled him. Even now he had several packs of cards in his pocket, both marked and unmarked. Berish was notoriously restless. He could not stay in a chair. While everyone else sat around the table, he wriggled like a caged animal or a wolf trying to bite his own tail. He cocked his head and spoke out of the side of his mouth. "When will you become one of us, eh?" he asked Yasha in his nasal tones. "Clasp my hand and join the brotherhood. And rot in jail? Keep your wits about you, and you will skim the cream right off the top." "Well, you can't be too smart," called out Blind Mechel. "Anybody can get caught." "All you have to know is how the wind is blowing," Berish Viskover shot back. Yasha knew well that he must not linger. Elzbieta would be bursting with impatience for him to return. Magda also expected him. Bolyak despised him, and only sought an excuse such as this to destroy him. But Yasha couldn't just walk out. He had known these people since childhood. They had seen his progress from a bear trainer's assistant to a star in the Polish theater. The men clapped him on the back, the women flirted with him. They all admired him as a master. He doled out cigars, cigarettes. There were also several former sweethearts of his in the crowd who, although respectably married now and mothers, looked at him coquettishly, grinning reminiscently. Although he had at first been discreet with Zeftel, she herself had revealed their relationship. For such a trollop, a lover was something to advertise. At first they gossiped about current events. What was new in the world? When would war start with Turkey again? And what did those rebels want who threw bombs, tried to assassinate the Tsar, and called strikes against the railroads? What was new in Palestine? Who were these heretics who built colonies in the dried-out swamps? Yasha explained everything. He read all the Warsaw newspapers as well as the Israelita. He even glanced at the Hebrew Gazette, although he did not understand the modern expressions. Here in Piask, the citizens squatted like toads on a tree stump, but out in the world, things were happening fast. Prussia had become a powerful nation. The French had annexed parts of Africa, where the black people lived. In England, ships that could cross the ocean in 10 days were being built. In America, trains ran right over the rooftops, and a building 30 stories high had been erected. Even Warsaw grew larger and more beautiful each year. The wooden sidewalks had been torn up, inside plumbing installed. Jewish children were permitted to attend the gymnasia and go abroad to study at foreign universities. The thieves listened, scratching their heads. The women, their faces flushed, traded glances. Yasha told them of the Black Hand Society in America. He related how they sent a note signed with a black hand to a millionaire. Send this many dollars or you'll get a bullet in your head. Even if the millionaire had 1,000 bodyguards, if he didn't pay the ransom, he was murdered. Beresviskover suddenly interrupted. It can be done here, too. And who will get the letter? Treitel the water carrier? The thieves laughed loudly and relit their burnt-out cigarettes. Subchapter 2. Blind Mechel could not wait. He said, Yasha, I want to tell you something. Yasha winked. I know, show me the bargain. Mechel unwrapped the paper slowly, revealing a huge lock, complete with clamps and appendages. Yasha instantly grew light-hearted. He began to examine the lock with the crossed eyes and comical mien of bewilderment and mockery, which had always brought laughter from a tavern full of peasants, as well as from the audience of the Warsaw Summer Theater, Alhambra. In 1 second he had become transformed. He hissed, wriggled his nose, even artfully waggled his ears. The women giggled. Where did you dig up this contraption? Better show what you can do, Blind Mechel said, half in anger. God himself couldn't open such a sealed chamber pot, Yasha jested. Once you put a Peter like this together, it is finished. But if you blindfold me, I'll jimmy it open with my eyes shut. Maybe you'd like to bet on it, eh? Suppose I put up 10 rubles to your 1. Done. Put your money where your mouth is, Chaim Leib shouted. We don't need money, I trust him. Children, blindfold me, Yasha said, but do it so I can't see a thing. I'll blindfold you with my apron, said small Malka, a woman with red hair tied up in back by a kerchief. Her husband was serving time in the Yanov penitentiary. She undid the apron from her waist and, standing behind Yasha, bound his eyes. Meanwhile, she tickled him between the ears with her forefinger. Yasha remained silent. What have they put into the mechanism, he wondered. Although confident as ever, he conceded the possibility of failure. A locksmith had once made a lock for him that no key or jimmy could open. Everything inside had been welded together. Malka folded the alpaca apron several times and knotted it firmly, powerfully, despite her small hands. But as usual, between the eye and the bridge of the nose, there was a space through which he could see. Yasha, nevertheless, did not need to see. He drew from his pocket a thick piece of wire with a sharp point. This was his skeleton key for all locks. He displayed it to the group before turning to the lock. Now he tapped the lock from outside like a doctor tapping his patient with a stethoscope. Still blindfolded, he located the keyhole and inserted the point of the wire. Once within, he worked the wire so that it kept penetrating deeper, reaching to the lock's entrails. For a while he probed and burrowed. He marveled at his own competence. That piece of wire revealed all the secrets, all the wiles that the Lublin experts had incorporated into the lock. Complex as it seemed, it was as childishly simple as the riddles schoolboys ask each other in Cheder. If you guessed one, you guessed them all. Yasha could have opened the lock immediately, but he did not wish to shame Blind Mechel. He decided to act out a little scene. Say, this is a hard nut to crack, he grumbled. What sort of beehive have they braided in there? So many teeth and hooks. A regular machine. He strained, pushed the wire. He raised his shoulders as if to signify, I don't have the faintest idea of what's inside this thing. The crowd grew so quiet that the only sound was Chaim Leib snorting through his broken, polyp-filled nose. Several of the women began to whisper and giggle, a sign of tension. Now Yasha made the same remark he had made at numerous performances. "A lock is like a woman. Sooner or later it must surrender." Laughter broke out amongst the women. "All women aren't the same. It's a matter of patience. Don't be so sure of yourself," Blind Mechel said in anticipation. "Stop rushing me, Mechel. You've been fussing with this thing for half a year. You've put everything into it. After all, I'm not Moses." "It doesn't give, eh?" "It'll give, it'll give. You only need to squeeze the belly button." And at that moment the lock sprang open. Laughter, applause, and a general din followed. "Malka, untie me," Yasha said. And with trembling fingers Malka untied the apron. The lock lay on the table as if impotent and disgraced. Everyone's eyes were merry, but Blind Mechel's single eye remained grimly earnest. "You're a warlock, or my name isn't Mechel." "Sure, I took up black magic in Babylon. I can turn you and Malka here into rabbits." "Why pick on me? My husband needs a wife, not a rabbit." "Why not a rabbit? You could jump into his cell through the bars." Yasha felt ashamed, sitting amongst this unsavory band. If Amelia only knew with whom he associated. She considered him a genius, an exalted artist. They discussed religion, philosophy, the immortality of the soul. He quoted the wise sayings of the Talmud to her. They spoke of Copernicus, Galileo, and here he was with the thieves of Piask. But that's how he was. There was always another role for him to play. He was a maze of personalities, religious and heretical, good and evil, false and sincere. He could love many women at once. Here he was, ready to renounce his religion, yet when he found a torn page from a holy book, he always picked it up and put it to his lips. Everyone was like a lock, each with his own key. Only one such as he, Yasha, could unlock all souls. "Well, here is your money." And Blind Mechel produced a silver ruble from a deep purse. For a moment Yasha considered refusing the ruble, but he realized that this would have been a mortal insult to Mechel, especially now that the band's treasury was so depleted. The Brotherhood had a high regard for honor. He could get knifed for refusing. Yasha took the proffered ruble, weighing it in his palm. "An easy profit. Every one of your fingertips should be kissed," boomed Blind Mechel in the deep voice of a giant. It seemed as if his voice emanated from his thick belly. "It is a gift from God," small Malka said. Zeftel's eyes glistened with triumph. Her cheeks grew red. Her lips mutely suggested kisses and endearments. Yasha knew he was idolized by all here, both men and women. He was the shining beacon to the citizens of Piask. Chaim Leib's face seemed yellow as the brass of the samovar Zeftel had placed upon the table. "If you became one of us, the world would be yours." "I still believe in the 8th commandment." "Listen to him. He thinks he's a saint." Bierishviskover sprayed his words. "Everyone steals. What did the Prussians do some time ago? Took a hunk out of France, then demanded 1 billion marks besides. They held France by the windpipe. Isn't that stealing?" "War is war," Chaim Leib said. "Whoever can grabs. That's the way it's always been. The little gonif gets the noose, the big gonif the fat goose. How about a game of cards?" "You want to play?" Yasha asked, teasingly. "Did you bring some new hocus-pocus from Warsaw?" Bierishviskover asked. "Let's see you do your stuff. Is this a theater?" And Yasha took the deck of cards from Bierishviskover. He began to shuffle them very fast. The cards flew into the air, leaped like fish in a net. Suddenly Yasha did something with his hand, and the cards fanned out like an accordion. Chapter 4. It was restful to be alone with Magda in the wagon again. The summer was in full bloom. The fields grew golden. Fruit ripened in the orchards. Intoxicating earth aromas induced lassitude and an ethereal calm. "Oh, God Almighty, you are the magician, not I," Yasha whispered, "to bring out plants, flowers, and colors from a bit of black soil." But how had it all come about? How did the stalks of rye know about bearing grain? And how did the wheat know about reproducing itself? No, they didn't know. They did it instinctively. But someone must know. Yasha sat in the driver's seat with Magda and gave the horses free rein. They knew the road by now. All sorts of creatures crossed their path, a field mouse, a squirrel, even a tortoise. Unseen birds sang and trilled. In a forest clearing, Yasha spied a flock of gray birds. They were lined up as if about to hold an assembly. Magda cuddled next to him silently. It seemed as if her peasant's eyes saw things a city dweller could not see. Yasha was preoccupied also. Towards evening, when the sun set and the wagon trundled along a forest road, he clearly perceived Amelia's face. Like the moon over the pine trees, it moved backwards. The black eyes smiled, the lips moved continuously. He put his arm around Magda, and she laid her head on his shoulder, but he was not with her. He was asleep and awake at the same time. He tried to will a sort of decision, but none would come. His fancy grew vivid, and he dreamed this was not a wagon, but a train to Italy, in which he rode with Amelia and Halina. He could almost hear the locomotive whistle. Outside the windows, cypress trees, palms, mountains, castles, vineyards, orchards of orange and olive trees passed. Everything seemed different. The peasants, their women, the houses, the haystacks. Where have I seen such things, Yasha wondered? In paintings? In the opera? It's as if I'd already experienced all this in an earlier existence. Customarily, he made 2 stopovers on his trip, but he decided now to ride ahead and arrive in Warsaw in the morning. Highwaymen supposedly lurked along the road, but Yasha kept a pistol in his pocket. Riding, he imagined himself performing at European theaters. Ladies in boxes fixed their lorgnettes upon him. Ambassadors, barons, and generals came backstage to pay respects. Now, with a pair of artificial wings, he flew over the capitals of the world. Multitudes of people ran through the streets, pointing, shouting, and as he flew, he received messages by carrier pigeon. Invitations from rulers, princes, cardinals. In his estate in the south of Italy, Amelia and Halina waited for him. He, Yasha, was no longer a magician, but a divine hypnotist who could control armies, heal the sick, flush criminals, locate buried treasures, and raise sunken ships from the ocean depths. He, Yasha, had become the emperor of the entire world. He ridiculed his fancies, but could not banish them. Like locusts, they fell upon him, daydreams of harem girls, slaves, tricks that were beyond nature, magic potions, charms, and incantations that unfolded all secrets and bestowed infinite powers. In his imagination, he even led the Jews out of exile, gave them back the land of Israel, rebuilt the Temple of Jerusalem. He suddenly began to crack his whip as if to dispel the demons which had invaded his thoughts. He needed a clear head now more than ever. He had prepared a series of new and dangerous stunts for his repertoire. One of these involved performing a somersault on the tightrope, a stunt as yet unattempted by any other performer. The important thing was to make up his mind about Amelia. Was he truly prepared to forsake Esther and go to Italy with Amelia? Could he treat Esther so cruelly after her many years of devotion and loyalty? And was he, Yasha, reconciled to converting, becoming a Christian? He had given Amelia his solemn promise, sworn an oath, but was he ready to honor it? And another thing, he could not carry out his plans with Amelia without a large sum of money, at least 15,000 rubles. For months now he had been toying with the possibilities of a robbery, but was he indeed capable of becoming a thief? Just recently he had told Chaim Leib that the 8th commandment was holy to him. He, Yasha, had always prided himself on his honesty, and what would Amelia's reaction be if she knew what he intended? And what would Esther say? Yes, and his mother and father in the other world. After all, he believed in immortality. A while back his mother had even saved his life. He had heard her voice caution him, "Move back, son, move back." And minutes later a heavy chandelier fell where he had been standing. It would surely have crushed him had he not heeded his dead mother's warning. He had put off his decision until now, but he could not delay any longer. Amelia was waiting for him to make up his mind. He also had to decide what to do about Volsky, his impresario, who handled all of his engagements. This same Volsky had elevated him, Yasha, from poverty, had advanced his career. He, Yasha, could not repay Volsky with evil. As strong as Yasha's love was for Amelia, just as full was it of temptations. He had to decide this very night, choose between his religion and the cross, between Esther and Amelia, between honesty and crime, a single crime for which, with God's help, he would later make restitution. But his mind would resolve nothing. Instead of attacking the main problem, it dallied, went off on tangents, became frivolous. He could have been the father of grown children by this time, yet he remained the schoolboy who had played with his father's locks and keys and trailed the magicians through the streets of Lublin. He could not even be sure of the extent of his love for Amelia, decide whether the feeling he had was really what is known as love. Would he be able to remain true to her? Already the devil tempted him with all sorts of speculations about Halina, how she would grow up, become enamored of him, become her mother's rival for his affections. It's true, I am depraved, he thought. What was it Father called me? A scoundrel. Lately his father had appeared in his dreams every night. Just as Yasha closed his eyes, he would see his father. The older man would moralize, warn him, counsel him. "What are you thinking of?" Magda asked. "Oh, nothing." "Is it true that Yentl the thief is coming to Warsaw?" Yasha stirred. "Who said that?" "Polyak." "Why didn't you say anything about it until now?" "I keep quiet about a great many things." "She is coming, but what's that have to do with me? Her husband's left her, and she's starving. She's looking for work as a maid or cook." "You go to bed with her?" "No." "You have a girl in Warsaw, too." "You're babbling." "A widow by the name of Amelia. That's whom you're in such a hurry to see." Yasha was dumbfounded. How could she have learned about Amelia? Had he said something? Yes, he had. He always had to boast. It was his nature. He had even confessed it to Yentl. He hesitated a moment. "It is no concern of yours, Magda. My love for you won't change." "She wants to go off to Italy with you." "Never mind what she wants. I could as easily forget you as my mother." He did not know himself if he were telling the truth or lying. Magda remained silent. Once again she laid her head on his shoulder. Subchapter 2. In the middle of the night it suddenly grew warm, as if a nocturnal sun had begun to shine. The moon was overcast. The sky writhed with clouds. All at once thunder and lightning began. In a flash of light the fields were illumined as far as the horizon. The stalks of wheat bowed, and the rain struck like a deluge. Before Yasha could collect his thoughts, the sheets of water began to flail the wagon like a hailstorm. The tarpaulin tore loose from the frame. The monkey choked off a terrified scream. In less than a minute the highway was mired. Magda clung to Yasha like a dumb creature. Yasha began to lash the horses. The village of Makov was nearby, and they would be able to find shelter there. It was a miracle that the wheels did not leave the road. The horses waded in water nearly up to their posterns. Somehow or other the wagon rolled into Makov, but he knew of no inn or public house in town. Yasha drove into a synagogue courtyard. The rain ceased and the sky began to clear. Clouds drifted westward, their edges glowing in the rising sun like cinders after a fire. The puddles and gutters ran red as blood. Yasha left the team and wagon in the courtyard, and he and Magda walked into the study house to dry off. It was not right for him to escort a Gentile into a house of worship, but it was a matter of life or death now. She had already begun to cough and sneeze. Outside, day was breaking, but in the prayer house it was still night. A memorial candle flickered in the menorah at the prayer stand. At a lectern sat an old man reciting from a thick prayer book. Yasha observed that the old man's head was sprinkled with ash. "What is he doing?" Yasha wondered. "Have I already forgotten so much of my heritage?" Yasha nodded to the old man, and he nodded back and placed his finger upon his lips to signify that he must not at this time speak. Magda sat down on a bench near the stove, and Yasha turned to her. There was nothing with which they could wipe themselves. They would just have to wait until everything dried of its own accord. It was warm here. Magda's face glowed in the murk like a pale stain. A puddle had collected beneath her body. Stealthily, Yasha kissed her on the forehead. He looked at the reading desk with the 4 pillars, the holy ark, the cantor's lectern, the shelves of sacred books. Standing there, soaking wet, dripping water and sweat, he tried, by the light of the memorial candle, to read the tablet on the cornice of the holy ark, supported by the gilded lions. "I am the Lord. Thou shalt have no other gods. Honor thy father and mother. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not covet." Now it was dark, and all of a sudden the prayer house was suffused with a purple glow, as if from a heavenly lamp. Suddenly Yasha recalled what the old man was doing. He was still reciting the midnight service, lamenting the destruction of the temple. Soon other Jews began to arrive, mostly older men, bent, with gray beards and feet that could barely scrape along. God in heaven, how long was it since he, Yasha, had been in a holy temple? Everything seemed new to him, the way the Jews recited the introductory prayers, how they donned the prayer shawls, kissed the fringed garment, wound the phylacteries, unrolled the thongs. It was all strangely foreign to him, yet familiar. Magda had gone back to the wagon, as if fearful of all this intense Jewishness. He, Yasha, chose to remain a moment longer. He was part of this community. Its roots were his roots. He bore its mark upon his flesh. He understood the prayers. One old man said, "God, my soul." A second slowly told the story of how God had tested Abraham, commanded him to offer his son Isaac as a sacrifice. A third intoned, "What are we? What is our life? What is our piety? All the mighty men are as naught before thee, the men of renown as though they had not been. For most of their works are void, and the days of their lives are vanity before thee." He recited it all in a lamenting chant, and looking all the while at him, Yasha, as if aware of what went on in his mind. Yasha breathed deeply. He smelled tallow, wax, and something else, a blend of putrefaction and spirits of hartshorn, as during the days of atonement, when he had been but a lad. A small man with a red beard came up to Yasha. "You want to pray?" he asked. "I'll fetch you phylacteries and a prayer shawl." "Thank you, but my wagon is waiting." "The wagon won't run away." Yasha gave the man a kopeck. On his way out he kissed the mezuzah. In the antechamber he saw a barrel filled with pages torn from holy books. He rummaged through the barrel and came up with a torn book. An exalted scent arose from the tattered leaves, as if lying there in the barrel they had continued being read by themselves. After a while, Yasha located an inn. He and Magda had to put on some dry clothes. He had to repair the wagon, grease the axles, rest the team. They had to eat breakfast and catch a few hours' sleep. Since he was traveling with a Gentile, Yasha spoke Polish to the innkeeper, posing as a Pole himself. He and Magda sat down at a long bare table, and a Jewess in a head kerchief, with red eyes and a hairy pointed chin, served them black bread, cottage cheese, and coffee with chicory. She looked at the prayer book which Yasha had tucked into his pocket and said, "Where did you get that, sir?" Yasha stirred. "Oh, I picked it up near your temple. What is it, a holy book?" "Let me have it, sir. You wouldn't understand it anyway. To us it is sacred." "I want to look it over." "How can you? It's in Hebrew." "I have a friend, a priest. He knows Hebrew." "The book is torn. Give it to me, sir." "Lay off," her husband growled from a distance in Yiddish. "I don't want him walking around with a Jewish book," she replied aggressively. "What's written here?" Yasha asked. "How to swindle Christians?" "We swindle nobody, sir, neither Jews nor Christians. We earn our bread honestly." A side door opened and a boy walked in, wearing a lint-covered cap and an unbuttoned dressing gown from under which showed a fringed garment. He had a narrow face and 2 wide sidelocks like skeins of flax. He had apparently just gotten up, as his eyes were still heavy with sleep. "Grandma, give me milk and water," he said. "Did you make your ablutions?" "Yes, I did." "Did you say your 'I thank thee'?" "Yes, I did." And he wiped his nose on his sleeve. Yasha continued eating and looked at the boy. "Can I forsake all this?" he asked himself. "This is mine, after all, mine. Once I looked exactly like that boy." A strange urge came over him to examine as quickly as possible the writing in the torn prayer book. A wave of affection drew him to this grandmother who rose each day with the sun and cooked and baked, swept the house and served the guests. An alms box hung on the doorpost. Here she deposited any spare groschen she could scrape together to help the Jews who wished to go to the Holy Land to die. The atmosphere in this house was alive with Sabbath, holidays, the anticipation of the Messiah, and of the world to come. As the old woman hustled about, she whispered through her whitish lips and nodded her head as if aware of a truth known only to those not deceived by the vanity of worldly things. Subchapter 3. The arrival in Warsaw was always an event for Yasha. This was where his income came from. It was here that his impresario lived, Mieczysław Wolski. Posters already plastered on the walls read, "On July 1st, the Summer Theater Alhambra presents the distinguished circus performer and hypnotist Yasha Mazur with a new repertoire of tricks that will astound the esteemed public." Yasha had an apartment here on Freta Street, near the Avenue Dluga. Even the mayors, Kara and Shiva, Dust and Ashes, revived when they approached Warsaw. It was no longer necessary to urge them on. As soon as the wagon crossed the Praga Bridge, it lost itself in the congestion of houses, palaces, omnibuses, carriages, droshkis, shops, cafes. The air smelled of fresh baking, coffee, horse manure, smoke from trains and factories. In front of the castle, occupied by the Russian Governor-General, a military band performed. It must have been some sort of holiday, since every balcony flew Russian flags. The women already wore wide-brimmed straw hats decorated with artificial fruits and flowers. Carefree young men in straw hats and light-colored suits strolled about, twirling their canes. Through the tumult, the locomotives whistled and hissed. The railroad couplings clanged. Trains for Petersburg, Moscow, Vienna, Berlin, Vladivostok left from here. After the sobering period following the uprising of 1863, Poland had entered an age of industrial reform. Lutz had expanded with American haste. In Warsaw, wooden sidewalks were ripped up, interior plumbing installed, rails for horse trolleys laid, tall buildings erected, as well as entire courtyards and markets. The theaters offered a new season of drama, comedy, operas, and concerts. Prominent actors and actresses arrived from Paris, Petersburg, Rome, and even distant America. The bookstores featured newly published novels as well as scientific works, encyclopedias, lexicons, and dictionaries. Yasha breathed deeply. The journey had been wearying, but the city exhilarated him. If it's this stimulating here, how much more must it be abroad, he mused. He wanted to run immediately to Amelia, but checked himself. He could not very well come sleepy, unshaven, disheveled. Also, he had first to see Mieczysław Wolski. Yasha had sent him a telegram while still in Lublin. Yasha had not been in Warsaw recently. He had been touring the provinces. While on the road, he always worried that his apartment would be burglarized. He kept his library there, his antiques, and his collection of billboards, newspaper clippings, and reviews. But, God be praised, the door was still securely locked by 2 heavy locks, and everything within was in order. Layers of dust were everywhere, and the air smelled musty. Magda immediately began to tidy up. Volsky came in a drozhki, a Jewish-looking Gentile with black eyes, a beaked nose, a high forehead. His artist's cravat perched crookedly on his shirt front. Yasha received from him numerous offers to perform in Russian and Polish cities. Twirling his black mustache, Volsky spoke with the fervor of those who depend upon the fame of others for their livelihood. He had even prepared a schedule for Yasha to follow after his summer engagement at the Alhambra had ended. But Yasha realized that Volsky's bombast was unnecessary. Only the provinces wanted him. No offers had come from Moscow, Kiev, or Petersburg. His earnings in the provinces were negligible.